Bom dia. É muito bom estar aqui. Unfortunately, those are the last words that you will hear of your beautiful language. My wife is Portuguese, actually. She's very unhappy with me that the only Portuguese I speak is restaurant Portuguese. You know, bacalhau, caipirinha, pastéis de nata. Well, that's really Portuguese, too. Where is this thing? So, people everywhere have a love affair with their cars. I know for me, the day I turned 16, I got my driver's license, and the car was a rite of passage, and I dreamed of owning a car. I drive my car whenever I can, rather than taking a limo or a taxi in Toronto, because I just love to drive. And the automobile is an expression of your personal taste and your sensibilities about the world, and it gives you freedom to move around. The car was the epitome of the industrial age. The auto industry was the greatest industry in America and in many countries all around the world. The United States, America's greatest corporation, was General Motors. The industrial age was an age of scale, and it was an age of standardization. We have mass production and mass distribution and mass marketing, mass media, mass education, mass democracy. The industrial age was a great age, but it came with a cost. And if you look today at the automobile industry, or you think about me trying to get to a restaurant last night, going about 3 kilometers and taking an hour and 10 minutes in my automobile, there's a problem. Cars today are part of a big problem, and they typify the fact that the industrial age is finally coming to an end. Cars are top 3 as a source of pollution and contribution to climate change. Automobiles, after medical causes and all wars and murders and other violent acts combined, are the next largest source of death, road accidents. Automobiles in large cities, and the world is moving towards cities, are increasingly becoming ineffective as a way of moving around. And for many years, obsolescence was built into the system, so you had to replace it constantly. The car eats up a huge part of arable land, and we can't continue to move forward with the automobile as we've known it. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I think we need to reinvent the car, we need to reinvent the auto industry, and we need to reinvent transportation for a new age of networked intelligence. And fortunately, we can do that. And you in this room will be important in that. You see, because the printing press got us from feudalism and colonies and city-states to nation-states. The printing press and later radio and television were the technologies and the media of the industrial age. Now, once again, the technology genie is out of the bottle. It's called the internet. I hear it's going to be big. I'm thinking of investing in the internet. That's a joke. Only the new media is very different than what we've had. You see, the printing press, then radio and television, gave us access to recorded information and knowledge. The internet gives us access to that. You can go to the Google and ask questions. But it gives us access to the intelligence contained in the crania of other people. And as the physical world becomes smart and begins to communicate with trillions of inert objects in our world that are connected, we can move to a whole new paradigm. And that new paradigm is not going to be replacing all of our roads or automobiles with some kind of public transportation, although there's a role for public transportation in the world. It's going to be reinventing the automobile. So if you look around today, you'll see this great conflict or contrast between these old industrial age institutions and the contours of a set of sparkling new initiatives that show the new way forward. The old industrial age corporation is giving way to new models. The financial system, well, the core modus operandi, Wall Street, almost brought down global capitalism. It hasn't changed. We need to reinvent it. The newspaper, I'm moving along the top here. The last newspaper in Brazil will be published in the year 2030 because newspapers are not really needed anymore. Twitter is my newspaper. I organize it according to politics and economics and sports and personal stuff and so on. As one youngster said to us, if the news is important, it will find me. The universities and the schools. We have the very best model of education that 17th century technology can provide. It's the industrial model, right? Something in the top or in the center pushes out standardized units of something to passive recipients. They push out automobiles. They push out newspapers, television shows, lectures. The university today is still based on this idea of the lecture. I'm a teacher, I have knowledge. You're a student, you don't. Get ready. Here it comes. And your goal is to take it into short-term active working memory and through practice and repetition to build deeper cognitive structures so you can recall it to me when I test you. Drill and kill. Sage on the stage. To me, the lecture is the process whereby the notes of a lecturer go to the notes of a student without going through the brains of either. Now, I appreciate the irony that I'm standing up here giving you a lecture. But this is actually not a good way of learning. None of you are going to remember the 16 institutions or the 5 principles or the 7 business models that I'm about to tell you. I'm just trying to convince you of a single idea. Lectures are good for that. So, on the other hand, because of the internet, we can see a whole new model of each of these emerging. And I'm here today to tell you about the auto industry and what that looks like. So let's get into it. Well, first of all, why is this huge change occurring? There are 4 big drivers that are turning the industry upside down. In addition to the demand pull from the global business environment for a new kind of industry. The first is a technology push. And I'm going to talk to you about 5 things. First, we have the social web. Twitter announced it's going to have an IPO yesterday. We've got 1 billion people on Facebook. But this is not just about hooking up online. The internet is becoming a new means of production. Social networking is becoming social production. And it's beginning to change the way that we orchestrate capability in society to innovate, to create goods and services, and to engage with the rest of the world. Secondly, we have mobility. And there are now 2 billion people on this planet with access to the internet. And it's going to 7 billion, according to Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen from Google, in a very interesting book called The New Digital Age. It's going to 7 billion in the next 10 years. But there are already that many mobile devices, and now smartphones are outselling traditional telephones. I was in Kenya, in the Masai Mara, the middle of nowhere, and I met a 14-year-old goat herder. She herds goats. She didn't have power. She lived in a little nomadic hut. She didn't have water. She drank goat's milk, but she had a mobile device that could pull up a browser. Now, big cognitive dissonance as all this occurs. She can go onto the internet, but she's 14. She's pregnant with her second child. She's married to a 65-year-old, but she can get market prices for goats. Her old husband doesn't really know what this is and doesn't trust. So this is going to be disruptive, but it's definitely happening. Now, tied in with mobility, we have geospatiality. The old web, you surfed websites. The new web, you surf physical reality. So you can walk outside this building with Layer or with Google Glass or something like that, and you look around, and it tells you about the building. And what do you want to know? It's like a video camera, but it's annotating things. There's an ATM, and over there, if you go around the corner, is a men's shoe store. The digital and physical worlds are now intersecting, and this is going to be very important when we think about the car. Then we have the so-called big data revolution. But I think most people have not really keyed in on the big thing that's happening there. Data is becoming social. It's collected socially as billions and billions of interactions, transactions, and communication are happening like every day around the world. And this is creating a ginormous database. Data is now analyzed socially. It used to be you sat there in front of an analytics tool in a dark room and you were looking at numbers and so on. Now everyone gets access to these tools and you can analyze them in a social way. And they're becoming much more visual too, so regular people can access big data. Then we have the rise of the so-called M2M, machine to machine, or industrial internet. The physical world is becoming smart. Billions and trillions of inert objects that are smart communicating devices. My hotel room has a door with a chip in the door, and I think the door is smart, and it's connected to a network. And I think the door, because it's a relatively new hotel, has an IP address, which means the door is an internet appliance. I had a friend in Miami, when I was in Miami, I was in a hotel, and I had a camera stolen, and the door knew about me. It knew who'd been in and out of the hotel. We found of the room. We found an unauthorized access. I have a friend in Toronto. Everything in his house that has electrical power has an IP address, and all these things talk to each other. I have no idea what his refrigerator says to his toaster, but he was actually bragging that his fence talks to his sprinkler system. And I said, well, Ken, why would you care? And he says, well, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler is my first line of defense. So the physical world is becoming smart, and this is so important. So it means that automobiles become smart communicating devices that can be connected to networks. And you know all about the autonomous vehicle systems that Google has been working on. Google, why would Google be doing? Well, it turns out that Google is kind of collecting a lot of data every second of the day, and they have a lot of information that can be very helpful in doing something like creating a whole new paradigm of what is an automobile. You know the idea of a paradigm? It's a mental model, and it puts boundaries around what we think. Paradigms constrain our actions, and they're often based on assumptions that are so strong that we don't know that they're there. The earth is at the center of the universe. That was a paradigm. The big problem in the world is communism. Remember that one? Automobiles have drivers. And something can happen in art, science, culture, technology, whatever, that changes that paradigm and causes us to think very differently about the world. Now, is this going to get us to the, anybody seen Minority Report, that movie? Three-dimensional autonomous vehicles. Now, we're not close to that yet, but I've talked to people who've driven in the Google autonomous vehicle, and the reaction of these people is shocking. They say they're exhilarated. They're not like, yeah, this is really cool. They're exhilarated by the fact that they can be in an automobile that drives itself. And if you get that right, then you have a virtual mass transit system, don't you? Because if you can start to put more people in cars, and cars are all moving along like a train, then essentially this is a form of mass transit. And then finally, we have the cloud. So think of the internet as being a computer, a computational platform. It's not about websites, eyeballs, stickiness, clicks, hooking up online. It's a big computer. You know, Thomas Watson, who founded IBM, was famously to have said, "The world will only need 5 computers." He said this in 1949. I think he was pretty close. You got the Google computer and the Amazon computer and the Apple computer and the Microsoft computer. Watson wasn't that wrong. And when you have a computational platform that we all share, there are huge advantages to that for everybody. It means that we can collaborate, but also that the world becomes each of our software development department, rather than you have to have a software development department within your own company. So the social web, mobility, big data, the industrial internet, and the cloud. This is a new paradigm in information technology. Now that's combining with a second big change, a demographic change. Who here is under the age of 34? Would you put up your hands, please? Okay. Who has children under the age of 34? Anybody? This is a very young audience. Well, I can be brief, because I'm going to talk to you young people about your generation. You're the first generation to come of age in the digital age, and your brains are different. And you behave differently as consumers and as employees. And overall, it's good. It's just not true that you're the dumbest generation, net addicted, glued to the screen, losing your social skills. The internet is eating the neocortex of youth today. Generation Me, a book says we've created a little army of narcissists. You don't give a damn. All you're into is this weird, risky youth culture, and you like this crazy hip-hop that's kind of sexist and racist, and it's a great stereotype. I did a $4 million research project where we interviewed 11,000 young people in 10 countries, including Brazil. Did this a few years ago. It's just not true. You're a great generation, actually. We can be very hopeful. I started studying this generation about 20 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are geniuses. Look at that, they're prodigies. And then I started to notice that all of their friends were like that too. And the theory that all their friends were geniuses, well, that's a bad theory. So I started working with 300 kids, and I wrote this book in 1997. And I said, this generation will have no fear of technology because it's not there. It's like the air. It's like I have no fear of a refrigerator, because it's not technology to me, right? So flash forward to today. You're not just growing up, you're grown up. You're coming into the workforce, into the marketplace, into society, and there's no more powerful force to change every institution than the first generation of digital natives. You're digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language, okay? So this is a huge force for change, and it's changing the auto industry. When I was 16, I have my driver's license. Many young people in many countries today are waiting. Some of them are not buying cars. And as consumers of automobiles, you heard a fabulous presentation from the NetPops people this morning about how you consume it very differently. Do you know, when it comes to consuming consumer electronics, Best Buy and companies like that have a huge problem called showrooming. You go into the big store and you look around, you try everything out, and then you say thank you, and then you go onto the internet and you purchase it at the lowest price. In the automobile industry, it's the opposite. You go online and you check everything out and you decide basically what vehicle you'd like, and then you go into the showroom to make the purchase. And you want to know, what kind of showroom is it? And is this person somebody I can relate to? And what kind of service are they going to give me? And so on. That's very interesting. Now, let's just look at some demographics briefly. You ever seen these? They're called population pyramids. So at the top are people 100 years old. At the bottom, 0 or 1 year old. And so these are all the 50-year-olds here. This is women and men. So Italy has a big middle-age group. When I was in Milano recently giving a speech. I said, who here has children under the age of 34? And no hands went up. Like 3 hands in this room of like 1,500 people. I almost said, you know what? Why don't we cancel my presentation right now? Go home, get a bottle of wine, light a candle, put on some nice music, make a baby, okay? Because this is a big problem. This is Iran. Look at all the young people in Iran, the most teenagers and 20-somethings of any country in the world. United States, the baby boom and the echo of the boom. You're the echo. This is South Korea. Whoa, that's a big problem. This is China. This is the one birth policy. And this is Iran, a big generation of teenagers. And there's India. So how does Brazil do? Not bad. Your parents did a good job. This is very important because you need young people in a society to be successful. And if these young people can have their birthright, access to a new medium of human communications, then they can grow up digital and they can be a huge force for growth, prosperity, good government, and change in the society. And of course, in Brazil, you've got 100 million people now that have access to the internet. Now, let's name the generation. I call them the net generation because they are the first to be bathed in bits. And you notice this cartoon here? Nobody even smiled. This is a cartoon from Growing Up Digital in 1997. When I put this cartoon on the screen in 1997, people were laughing so hard they almost would fall off their chair. Today, everybody looks at it, it's like, what's that weird thing in the crib? I mean, why doesn't the baby have an iPad or something like that? I mean, now the important point here is that time online is not taken away from hanging out with your friends, learning the piano, talking to your parents, or doing your homework. Time online for these kids growing up is taken away from TV. Television. The baby boomers watch 24 hours a week of TV. Passive recipients, right? Industrial age. One to many, one size fits all, you're inert. This generation, you come home, you turn on your computer, you're in 3 windows, you got 3 magazines open, and you're talking, more likely texting on the phone, and you got a video game kind of going on the side, and you're listening to iTunes, and oh yeah, you're doing your homework at the same time. But the television may be on, but the television is in the background. It's like ambient media. It's like music. And when they're online, what are they doing? They're reading, organizing, authenticating, composing their thoughts. This is something that's good. So I don't really have time to tell all this, but I'll just tell a story. On the extreme right there is a young woman named Sherry Kong. She's a 20-year-old student in New Zealand, hired by the government of New Zealand along with 80 other students. Their job? To teach the teachers how to use the internet in the classroom. I asked her, so Sherry, you're teaching the teachers. What are the teachers like as students? She says, Mr. Tapscott, the teachers, they're awful students. They talk in class. They don't do their homework. And beside her is Michael Furtick. He was older. He was 28 years old. And I've known Michael since he was 13, when he was the project manager on my website, growingupdigital.com. They made him the project manager as a 13-year-old because he was the oldest on the team. And Michael sold his own website when he was 15 years old for millions of dollars. One of the news reports said it was probably only $1 million. And I said, Michael, you sold it for $1 million? You should have called me. And he writes back, he says, Don, legally I can't tell you how much I sold it for. But I can tell you I'm very happy. And he didn't want the money to buy a Ferrari, although he bought an inexpensive little car but his mother had to drive around with him because he only had his learner's permit, right? He was 15. So he's the millionaire 15-year-old driving around in his car. So he wanted the money to invest in his next new venture. It's called takingitglobal.org. These are 400,000 young people who want to change the world. So if you're building an automobile, these are the 8 norms. If you're selling an automobile, you need to relate to these. If you're a car company, you're trying to create an industry or a company, relate. Number 1, freedom. Freedom of choice. When I was a kid, I had 3 television stations. You have millions of TV stations. Choice is like oxygen. They want to customize everything. The Mickey Mouse Club, Walt Disney, I was watching that as a kid. I wasn't customizing anything. Today, when you log on, you're changing everything. You're changing your world, right? They're a generation of scrutinizers. Car companies are becoming naked because at their fingertips, they have the best tools ever for finding out what's going on. Who's got better performance? Who's got better ratings? What's safest? So, when I was a kid, I saw a picture. It was a picture. These kids see a picture. What is it? An animation? A bot? A morph? Has it been photoshopped? I look at the cover of Vogue magazine. I see a model. My daughter sees a Photoshop job, okay? Her cheekbones are bigger. Her neck is longer. So this is very important. Now, when it comes to customization, what kind of car is Volvo? Volvo is the safe car, right? That's because in the industrial age, you could only have one way of communicating. You can have one message about a car. Well, how about this? I'm now interacting or I'm watching a movie and Simon Templar in the new version of The Saint drives on the screen with the new Volvo and I stop the action and I say, "What's that car?" And he gets out of the car and he says, "It's a Volvo." And he says to me, "What's important to you in a car?" And I say, "Performance." And he says, "Volvo is the performance car." Here's how it does against BMW 330i, and would you like to go for a real-time test drive, or how about to go into a Volvo owners group and discuss it? So the industrial age, one message can be turned on its head now. You can customize not just the vehicle, but the messaging. Integrity. This is a generation with very strong values. They want to know you're a good company. And that means that stuff like emissions and auto emissions are going to be more and more important. People said, no, they'll never care. They'll just want the best car for performance with the coolest brand at the lowest cost. No. Young people today are deciding, what kind of company is this? Is this a good company? They're a generation of collaborators. When I grew up watching TV, I was a passive recipient. They're collaborators. They want to have fun. And that's a good thing because a car is not just a way of getting around, it's a way to have fun. And they think that working, learning, collaborating, and having fun are the same thing. Do you know, in Brazil, over half of the young people that we surveyed said having fun with a product or service is as important as what the product or service does. Yesterday we were speaking to a consumer products group, like how do you have fun with paper towels, or with a mortgage. But you can have fun with an automobile and the whole experience of buying an automobile. They don't really want the car, they want the experience, right? And they want things to happen fast. And they're a generation of innovators. They love innovation. So these are 8 norms that exist across the 10 countries, and they differentiate them from their baby boomer parents. Now finally, there's a social revolution that's underway. Some huge shifts. First of all, everywhere people are moving to the city. So that congestion problem that I showed you is going to get worse and worse. And All around the world now, we have social networking that's enabling people to self-organize. So I'll just tell you a little story. About 6 years ago, somebody sent me an email, and they said, there's this guy named Barack Obama. He's trying to get the nomination for the Democratic Party, and he thinks your book, Wikonomics, is the key to getting elected and to changing America. You should go to myBarackObama.com. So I went there. There's my book on the screen. And he's saying, it's right there, one down from the homepage. We believe in the principles of Wikonomics and the use of the internet in every way possible. And I'm asking you to believe not just in my ability to bring about real change in Washington, I'm asking you to believe in your ability. And I looked at this thing, and well, my first reaction was, I am the man. Clearly. And, but I started looking around the website, and I get into it. It turns out I'm not the man. Because, yeah, there's a Wikonomics community. There's a single moms for daycare for Obama community. And there's a young firefighters for Obama community. He created a platform whereby 35,000 communities self-organized, and that's what brought him to power. This is a force for change. And it's a revolutionary force. And I use that word advisedly. This all started with the Tunisian Revolution, and social media has been key to every one of these. During the Tunisian Revolution, snipers were killing unarmed protesters, students in the streets. So the kids took their mobile devices, took pictures of the location of the sniper, triangulated the location, sent those pictures to friendly military units that came in, and they killed the snipers. You think the internet's about hooking up online? For these kids, it was a tool of self-defense. Social media was a tool of self-defense. During the Syrian revolution, up until a year ago when everything fell apart, students injured in the streets would be picked up by an ambulance and taken to a hospital, and you'd go in with a broken leg, and you'd come out with a bullet in your head. Assad was using the healthcare system to kill people. So these two 20-year-olds went onto Twitter, and they created an alternative healthcare system where if you got injured, a car would pick you up and take you to a temporary medical clinic where you get medical attention as opposed to being executed. So this is very complicated. It's messy. It's not going in a clear, easy route to a democratic and secular society, but it's all going in the right direction. And don't lose hope, okay? Because the arc of history is a positive one. The arc of history is a positive one. And this is all moving in the right direction. The train has left the station. The horse is out of the barn. The cat is out of the bag. Help me out here, okay? The toothpaste is out of the tube. We're not going back. And that gets us, sorry? Oh, you had another one. Okay, that gets us to an economic revolution. And this is the huge fundamental change that's underway in the industry. Last week, this man, Ronald Coase, died at the age of 102. And he's been the most influential economist for me in understanding how the internet changes business in the world. Now, he has no interest in the internet at all himself, and he's never written about it. But 60 years ago, he wrote a paper where he asked a question: why does the firm exist? He looked at Ford Motor Company, and he said, they have a power plant, a steel mill, a shipping company, a glass factory. They own a bank. They own rubber forests in Honduras to get rubber. They own mahogany forests. They were vertically integrated corporations. He said, why does this exist? And he said, because of collaboration costs. The costs of collaborating in an open market were greater than the costs of doing things inside the boundaries of the Ford Motor Company. Well, along comes the telephone, facsimile, information technology, the early days of the web, the internet, the social web. Transaction costs are dropping so much that peers can now come together and create value. Peers outside the boundaries of traditional companies. So if you can create an encyclopedia with 1 million people, it's 20 times bigger than Britannica, but according to the big study that's been done, the quality is just as good. What else could you create? Everyone here know about Linux? The Linux, would you put up your hand? You know about the Linux operating system? Linux is now the dominant operating system in the world. Nobody owns it. It's developed by volunteers, and it's in a commons. So this is a huge change that's underway. And I'm just going to go ahead here and tell you a story, and then I want to get right into the industry. So the reason I know this story is because this guy on the screen, his name is Rob McEwen, and he moved across the street from me in Toronto. And he held a cocktail party to meet the neighbors. And he said, "You're Don Tapscott. I've read some of your books." And I said, "Great." I said, "What do you do?" He says, "Well, I used to be a banker, and now I'm a gold miner." He's a funny guy. He introduces his wife to the group. He says, "My wife, Cheryl, she's a gold digger." Thankfully, she's not. She's a very accomplished person, and with a sense of humor. Anyway, he tells me this amazing story. He took over this gold mine in northern Canada, and his geologist couldn't tell him where the gold was. He gave them millions of dollars of money to get more geological data. They analyzed the data. They couldn't tell him where to go into production. He was so frustrated, he was ready to give up. But one day he had an epiphany. He wondered, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, maybe somebody else does. So he did a radical thing. He took his geological data, he published it on the internet, and he held a contest called the Goldcorp Challenge. It was basically $500,000 in prize money for anyone who can tell me, do I have any gold? And if so, where is it? He got 77 submissions. They came from all around the world. They used techniques that he'd never heard of. And for his $500,000 in prize money, Rob McEwen found $3.4 billion worth of gold. His market value went from $90 million to $10 billion overnight. And I can tell you, because he's my neighbor, he's a happy camper. He peered. He collaborated. He opened up. He shared his intellectual property. And he increased the value of his company by 2 orders of magnitude. So, you put all this together with a global economic crisis, we have a burning platform. We can no longer stick with the auto industry the way it was. We need to change. So, what does the new auto industry look like? Well, here are 7 themes. The first one is peer production. So, this is a newspaper that comes out every day. It's called the Don Tapscott's Innovators Daily. It is produced by me and my peers. Every day, this newspaper takes 0 seconds and costs me $0 to produce. It just automatically takes a Twitter feed that I have of the world's 120 top innovators and turns it into a newspaper. So why didn't the auto industry get together to develop hydrogen technology years ago? They should have collaborated as peers. They didn't do that, but they're doing it now. So GM and Honda, and now others, are participating in peer producing the next generation hydrogen engine. And that's a great thing. It's feasible. It's like Linux. All of the computer companies now embrace Linux as an operating system, and they compete on a higher level. You might have the same engines or the same core technology in the engine in every brand of automobile, but you'll compete on a higher level. Secondly, Ideagoras. This is my word, sorry. You know the Roman and Greek agora? It means marketplace. These are marketplaces for ideas. Ideagora. Sorry. These are open markets for uniquely qualified minds. So Procter & Gamble gets 60% of all of their innovation from outside the company. Why doesn't the auto industry do that? Procter & Gamble, they're looking for a molecule that'll take red wine off a shirt. There are 8,000 chemists inside their boundaries. They have 1.5 million chemists outside their boundaries. And they go into an idea agora, like Innocentive, and they find the molecule in the uniquely qualified mind. Maybe it's a chemist in Rio or a grad student in Taipei. And then Procter & Gamble pays them. They have $1 billion product. So the next step, the auto industry should be using tools like this, called Inno360, where you create your own innovation ecosystem, but it's outside the boundaries of the corporation. We've got a great example of this. It's called Local Motors. Do you know who here has heard of Local Motors? This is the next generation car company, maybe. So the story is an Iraq a veteran named Jay was fighting in Iraq. His best friend was killed in a Humvee beside him. And he wondered, why are we in Iraq? And one of the things he concluded is that we are here to defend America's energy sources. And the biggest consumer of that energy is this auto industry. So he decided, what if we transform the auto industry? So he created Local Motors. Now, he's got 5,000 designers for automobiles, but they're all outside the boundaries in an idea agora. He doesn't have a 3 million square foot manufacturing facility. He has 30 manufacturing facilities in 30 local places across the United States, hiring local people to build cars that are customized to local needs. That's why it's called Local Motors. Could this scale? I don't know. The good news and the bad news for Jay is that he's now got competitors. So why don't we start using ideagoras to help us better unlock the transportation bottleneck? So this is something that I did in the United States. It was in partnership with IBM, and it was called the ITS, Intelligent Transportation System Congestion Challenge. So we put out a challenge to companies in the US, how could we solve the traffic problem? And we got 120 companies competed. We created a crowd of 5,000 people that were the judges. And the judges had weighted voting. So if you're a member of the ITS board, you get 100 votes. If you're brand new and nobody knows who you are, you get 1 vote. But you do some good things, you can get 5 votes and 10 votes and 50 votes and so on. And they selected a company called iCarpool was the winner. And at the time, I thought the crowd made a mistake. But in hindsight, the best thing that you can do short term is to solve the problem of excess capacity. That you have all these vehicles that seat 5 people and there's 1 person in the vehicle. If you can get 2 people in the vehicle, you can reduce the number of vehicles on the road by 50%. And I could have got to my dinner last night on time. So the next one is called prosumers. Sorry, another new word. Turning consumers into producers. So how does that work? Well, we think about customers in the auto industry as being outside our boundaries. But why don't we move customers inside our network? We could do that, couldn't we? What would that look like? Well, Porsche has made an additional attempt, or an initial attempt to do that. Do you know about this? Where they engage 5,000 customers in designing the next generation 911 car, their sort of standard car. There were actually 54,000 fans cast votes. Now, they weren't designing the engine. They were designing details about the cars, the spoilers, the kind of paints that get used, the porous aero chip cup package, and so on. And it was just on August 9th of this year that they unveiled this crowdsourced car. This is turning consumers of an automobile into the producers of an automobile. Do you know this company, Threadless, clothing company? All of their designs are created by their customers. It's a very profitable company because the customers do all the work.
Paper or plastic?
Paper's fine.
This is the Doritos
I like these. Oh,
Super Bowl
nacho
contest.
cheese. Old school. Fiery habanero? Yeah, those are hot. Oh, salsa verde. Oh, blazing buffalo and ranch? Giddy up! Gonna need a cleanup on register 6.
Ew. Doritos held a contest and asked its customers to create its advertising. And that ad was created by 2 young women who were nobodies, and they ended up having their ad on the Super Bowl. Now, some of the ads were a little edgy, as you can imagine, and they never got onto the Super Bowl. But this is one of the more edgy ads that actually got on. This ad ran on the Super Bowl. It's one of my favorites. I mean, what ad agency is going to dress somebody up in a mouse suit and have them beat up your customer? But it turns out that's an effective ad for the Doritos demographic. So that's turning your consumers into producers of anything, including your advertising. And now, with 3D printing, it's in your lifetime you'll be able to print an automobile. We're printing houses now. Now, there's some problems. You can print a handgun today. But this is moving us from the one-size-fits-all industrial age, mass production, standardization. The consumer is inert to the new model where everybody gets to participate. The Alexandrian Library was the greatest, largest library in the world until the Library of Congress in the United States. And it was about sharing. And you know all this talk about the sharing economy? This is a huge theme today. It was the cover story of The Economist 2 months ago. And they show this house here, and they show excess capacity. So how often do you use your truck? And how often do you use the attic in your house? And how often do you use your lawnmower? And how often do you use your dog? Fortunately, it's not, your kid is not on there as well. But we have a lot of excess capacity, and we do in the auto industry. So who stayed in Airbnb? Anybody? Okay. This is now starting to rival hotels around the world. Couch surfing, anybody done that? The back there, a bunch of people. Crowdsourcing financing of companies. This is a little company called Nick's Wear. Full disclosure, my daughter is a co-founder of the company, and they're reinventing women's underwear. High-tech, multitasking underwear. Your underwear should do more. It's a long story. Anyway, they went online, and they had a target of $40,000, and then the largest retailer that they were targeting saw the campaign, went online, and bought up all of their inventory and took it way over the top. So they used a crowdfunding peer collaboration to generate it. The place to rent anything, Rentoid. You can rent just about anything you want. You rent a lawnmower or a pair of glasses. TaskRabbit. Do you know about this? Who knows about who will do my shopping for me? Who will deliver my groceries? Who will cut my lawn? Who will make me a bouquet of flowers? And now the internet drops transaction and collaboration costs. We can start to talk about things like this. SharedEarth.com, where people are sharing bits of their property for gardening. You've got Demure. This is for people who have vacation homes. If you have a vacation home, you use it like 5-10% of the time. Why not start to share these? This is an incredible company. I just agreed to go on the board, actually. You know about Zipcar. Robin Chase created Zipcar. Well, her next thing is Buzzcar. Whoops, I don't have it there. But anyway, Buzzcar doesn't buy cars. Buzzcar uses the existing capacity in automobiles. This is Relay Rides. Rent your perfect card. Unbeatable selection from our nationwide inventory, but all of the cars are not cars that they own. They're cars that you own. Here's Buzzcar. Borrow the car next door, or borrow anybody's car. Now, why would you lend your car? Won't it come back all damaged? They've got all that managed, including proper insurance and so on, and people are really careful when they're driving someone else's vehicle. That's what turns out to be the case. Sharing to manage traffic congestion. So this is iCarpool, people sharing their vehicles, all kinds of opportunities for sharing. Next one is platforms for participation. So Amazon is a platform. You think of it as a place where you buy stuff, as a website, but it's not. It's a platform where if you have a little company, Hiking Outpost, you can go onto Amazon and use the Amazon platform for inventory, retail, distribution, e-commerce. And big companies do this as well. How would you turn an automobile into a platform? Now, where you could, 40% of Amazon's revenues come from other companies that are using its platform. And these companies create value on the Amazon platform. How could you open up a car? How could you open up the APIs of a car? Well, what is a car? It's a way of moving around, but it's also increasingly a bunch of computers, right? And it's connected increasingly to networks. So why not open up the APIs of all of these computers? Not the drive system or the braking system and so on, but a car is a place for work and learning and entertainment as well. In the United States, it's a place for eating. 10% of meals are eaten in cars. Ugh. Anyway, you open up these systems, could you have hundreds or thousands of companies come and start to create value? Building the entertainment systems, building the navigational systems, building the work systems that increasingly are part of an automobile. So this is now beginning to happen. This is a really cool company called Genevieve, and it's a not-for-profit industry alliance committed to driving the broad adoption of in-vehicle infotainment as an open-source development platform. And it'll accomplish this through 3 top-level activities: aligning requirements, delivering reference implementations, and offering certification programs. So this is now an open platform. If you join this alliance, maybe you could turn those thousands of little companies into co-innovators, creating value on your platform. The World Wide Web Consortium, this is created by Tim Berners-Lee. It does standards for the World Wide Web. So HTML5 came out of W3C. Well, they now have a group that's developing automotive standards for developing all the systems that exist within an automobile. And then, of course, we've got all kinds of predictive traffic systems that come as the result of people opening up their APIs. In this case, these are 3 examples. We've got on the Google on the top left, IBM Smart Traveler on the top right, and Microsoft Clearflow on the bottom right. And essentially, you open up your APIs, and all of these vehicles, their location is known in all kinds of ways. They can be known through GPS, or they can be known through cell phones. Every vehicle has a cell phone in it, and cell phones on roads are vehicles. So you can use all this data to generate predictive traffic information. So now there are apps like, I'm about to drive home. Give me the 3 best routes, take into account traffic conditions, and as you're driving along, it says, whoop, you can't see it, but up ahead, there's going to be a big accident, and here's a new route for you to take. Okay, we're almost done. The global plant floor, the way that we manufacture everything, is changing. So the Chinese motorcycle industry shows the way forward. This is an industry that has dozens of little companies. So you make wheels, you make ignition systems, she makes frames, he does aftermarket support and service, you do final assembly, you collect the money. There's no company. That's a good job. You look like a trustworthy person. There's no company. These are all little companies. They meet on the internet and in tea houses. There's no Harley Davidson pulling all the strings. This is now 40% of global motorcycle production. And get ready for the $1,000 car coming from China using the same model. Now, this $1,000 car is not going to be a great car. But if you're driving around in India right now with your entire family of 5 people on a motorcycle, this $1,000 car is going to be an improvement. So I think you can peer produce just about anything, including the world's most complicated product, a next generation jumbo jet. Now, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner has had some problems because it was the first company to do this. But the CEO of Boeing said aircraft will never be built the old way. Boeing used to create a specification of 30,000 words, and then it would put that specification out to its supply chain. Now they said, you're not suppliers. Look at, you make the engine, the fuselage, the electronics, the entertainment system. We're going to give you a 20-page document describing what we're trying to achieve with this aircraft, and we're going to create a network and co-create this network together and manufacture it together. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner uses 25% less fuel than its competitors. That's called competitive advantage through a networked business model. When you're flying at 35,000 feet, it affects your body, your bone density, your metabolism, and other things, as if you're at 1,500 feet. So it's a more comfortable plane to be in. So this is revolutionizing the way that we build and manufacture things. And the auto industry is starting to embrace this. And the final one is for you personally, if you work for an auto company or an agency that's working with them. One youngster said to me, electronic mail, that's a great technology for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. But that's about the only use for email. Well, if that's what email is, how do we move to these next generation collaborative platforms within the workforce? So this is one called Moxie Software. They give it away for free. You've got Google, which is also free, Google Apps for Business. Google's making a big commitment to transforming the workplace. So these wiki workplace tools are social networks for the enterprise, and they're the new operating platform for the 21st century business. So, 7 new business models that are beginning to totally disrupt and change the auto industry, and it's all about finding the leadership for change. So, 4 big drivers. This is leading to a fundamental change in every industry and in every institution. And there are 7 new models that you can exploit for competitive advantage. So, to end, how do you find the leadership for change? Because when you have a new paradigm, vested interests fight against change. And leaders of old paradigms are often the last to embrace the new. Look at this. Google holds an event about the auto industry and use of new media to change marketing and affect the industry. And almost everyone in the audience is a young person. That's not coincidental. Leadership for this transformation is not going to come from the top. It's going to come from everywhere. And I'd like to end with a little video that makes that point. The video argues that the auto industry, well, the main car companies in the United States went bankrupt 5 years ago. They're doing okay now, but we need to move forward with a whole new paradigm. And if we do, it can be a very happy one, not just for the industry, but for us people who have a need to move around. This is my new book, and it talks about all this. If you want to get the book, the best way to get it is in massive volume. Christmas is coming soon. You look like people with friends. No, seriously. I've studied thousands of organizations, and recently I've been studying nature to try and understand what this new model of the enterprise looks like. Fish come in schools, bees come in swarms, starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. Murmuration. It refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And throughout the night, the starlings are out over a 20-mile radius, and they're foraging for food, doing what starlings do. And at night, they come together, and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. Now, the murmuration has a function. It warms the birds up for the cold night ahead. It helps them getting organized, and it protects the birds. Look on the right of the screen. You can see a hawk, a huge predator, being chased away by the collective power of the birds. And this thing is very loud, and it's very frightening, this murmuration. Now, there's leadership, but there's no one leader. And scientists that have studied it have said they've never seen an accident. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or might it actually be relevant to you? Well, this thing functions according to the principles of a new auto industry that I just described to you. It's a collaboration. It's about sharing and an exchange of information about food sources, about danger, about location. There are rules that govern it. The big rule being don't bump into anybody else. But this thing has a great integrity that somehow gives the birds a great courage to take on a fearsome predator. And there's an interdependence. Just like business can't succeed in a world that's failing, the individual birds behave as if their individual interests are tied in with the interests of the murmuration as a whole. So imagine, if you will, what if we connected ourselves on this planet through a vast network of glass and of air? Could we start to, as we share and connect our brains, could we go beyond just sharing information to start to share our intelligence? Could we create some kind of collective intelligence, some kind of consciousness that goes beyond an individual human to maybe a group, a company, a society? If we could do that, we could solve some big problems. And I look at this thing and I get a lot of hope. Now, during the early days of the Egyptian revolution, remember Hosni Mubarak, the dictator? People said, he's too strong. The kids, they're going to give up. Eventually, they can't keep coming out in a million kids on the street every day. They're going to give up. And I wrote at the time, I don't think they will give up, because if they do, Mubarak will hunt them down and their entire leadership, and he will kill them. Just like if this thing breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So I look at this thing and I do get a lot of hope that this smaller world our kids inherit might be a better one. You know, the industrial age media was centralized, one to many, and the model of production was the same model.
The new media is the antithesis. It's one-to-one. It's many-to-many. It's highly distributed. And as such, it has this awesome neutrality. And it will be what we want it to be. It's my hope that for you, it will be a platform to transform the auto industry for a new age. And maybe this new age will be an age where the promise is fulfilled and where peril is unrequited and avoided. Thank you very much.